Okay guys, what's up? We're back and we're going to talk about structures this time. So we covered arrays last time, so I want to go into structures a little bit. So what I did here in this example was just make something that I think a lot of people might use, or at least get the mechanics of this and incorporate it into a different way. So basically I just made like a little mini inventory on the screen. So when I go and pick something up, and this is using the existing pickup system that I made previously. So I have a cube that I can pick up. I have these little trophies. That's part of the starter content that I just made, able to be picked up with my interact system. And I have a key, which we used in a previous tutorial on how to do locked doors and a key system. So I can pick up the key, the trophies. So when I grab the key, you can see we get the key on our screen and it says 1. And then I can pick up the trophies. They'll stack on top of each other. You can pick up the cubes, have those stack, pick up more trophies. We're using a structure to make this, and there's a lot of different things you can use it for, but yeah, let's jump in and get it going. Okay, so I'm in my project here, and we're going to have to do a couple things with some widgets, so we'll get that out of the way. So we should have some sort of a main HUD or something like that. I already made one in an earlier tutorial here, so I'm going to go into my main HUD, and I'm just going to make a little size box here that we're going to display our widgets in. So I'm going to go up here and add a size box, and then I'm going to throw that on the canvas panel. And then I'm just going to look for a wrap box too. And we're going to throw the wrap box into the size box. So now I'm going to click on the size box here, and you can see it's up top here. So I'm just going to enter a size that I know is going to work for this. So I'm just going to do 225 on the X and 75 on the Y. And then I'm just going to drag that down. We can put that wherever we want. I'm just going to stick it down here for now. I'm going to make sure that my wrap box is going to be variable and just make sure that that's set to fill horizontally and vertically. And that should be all that we have to do in here. So I'm going to save that, compile, save that. So I'm back in the widgets folder here. We're going to right click and add a new widget. So we're going to go user blueprint, user widget. I'm just going to name this the WBP item for widget blueprint. So we'll open that up and we're going to start this out with a size box. So this is going to be what's displaying the actual item. And then we'll be creating this widget inside of the wrap box that we just made on the HUD. So with this size box here, we're going to check desired on screen. And I'm just going to make this 75 by 75. Okay, so we just have a little square like that. Next, I'm going to put a border in it. And I'm just going to set that border to be black with 0.5 on the alpha. Then I'm going to grab a overlay. And you can see we have a little bit of padding on the sides, but there's not much on the top there. So I'm going to just try changing padding to 5, and that will give me even padding going around here. Then I'm going to look for image, and this will be for our thumbnail. So I'm going to drop this on the overlay, and I'm going to look for text, and that will be for our quantity. So I'll grab editable text, put that on the overlay, and then I'm going to rename the image to something like thumbnail, make sure it's variable. The text I'm going to rename to quantity, make sure it's set to variable. So I'm going to click on the thumbnail, and we're going to want to do the fill on here. Fill horizontally and vertically. The quantity amount, I'm going to set mine to come in from the right, and I'm going to change the size to 15. So we have something like that. And we'll just see how that looks. I'm not really too concerned with how this looks right now because we can change this to make it work however we want. I want to get it going here. So this is going to be what's going to display our item and quantity. So I think we're pretty much done designing it. There's one thing we have to do which we didn't make yet. So we're going to make that now. So I'm going to go back to the folder and I'm going to create a structure for this now. So I'm going to go into Blueprint. So we right click in here, go to Blueprint and add a structure. And I'm just going to call this my item struct. And I'm going to use an enum as well. And that's just going to keep track of the items we have. So I'm going to go back into Blueprint, make an enumeration. And we'll just call this the item type. The names don't really matter. So I'm going to make this first. So we have 3 items, but I'm going to do 4 in here because the first one I want to be none. And then I'm going to just name them what I have. So I have a cube. I'll name one cube. We have a key. So I'm going to name one key. And then we have our trophy. So with those named, that's all we have to do in the enum. I'm going to save it. We can close that and we can open up the structure we made. So this item struct that we made. So all the structure is it's going to be an array and it's going to allow us to hold multiple variables inside of it. So we're going to use 4 variables in here. So the first one is going to be, we'll just say the type, and we're going to make this of the enum that we just made. So whatever we named that enum, I called mine item type. We're going to pick that. We're going to need a quantity, and I'm going to make that an integer. We're going to need a index, also an integer, and we're going to need a thumbnail, and I'm going to make that of the type texture 2D object reference. So that should be our structure setup. So I'm going to close that now. So now in the WBP item widget that we made, we're going to go to the graph now, and we're going to add that structure in here. So I'm actually going to get rid of tick and get rid of pre-construct. Go to variables, and I'm just going to make one called item. And then I'm going to make that of the type of the structure we just made, which I called mine item struct. So now we have that item in here. We're going to be creating this item slot for whatever item we have. So we're going to be passing in this item. So I want to make sure that that's instance editable, exposed on spawn. When this slot gets created, we want to tell it to, we want to populate the thumbnail and quantity from this item. So I'm going to drag out the quantity, drag out the thumbnail, and drag out our item here. So then we can drag off our item now, and we can do a break. And that will give us everything inside of the structure here. So then for our thumbnail, we can drag off and we can do set brush from texture, plug that into our event construct. And then the texture that it's asking for, we're going to feed it the thumbnail from our struct here. And then the quantity, we're going to drag off and do set text on that, and you should see the editable text that we made. So we're going to plug that in here, and we're going to drag off the quantity and run the quantity into that. So when this item slot gets made, we're going to basically populate the thumbnail and the quantity we made with whatever is in this item. So I'm going to save that, compile it. I'm going to go into my interact BPI. So I made this previously. If you don't have it, we just need an interface that we can use. So I'm just using one that I already have from my interact system, and I'm going to add a function to it. And I'm just going to call that collected item. And we're going to add a input on this, which is going to be our item. And that's going to be of the type item struct. Okay, so we're going to save and compile that. So now I'm going to go into the 3 items that I can pick up. So now when I pick this item up, what I want to do is get player character, and we're going to drag off that, and we're going to call that interface that we just made. So the collected items, and you want to make sure you get the one with message. So we'll be sending this interface to the player when we pick this item up. And now I'm going to split the structure pin. So now I'm in trophy right now, so I'm going to set this item type to trophy, and I'm going to set quantity to 1. So I did already download the thumbnails, so I have a thumbnail for each one of these. So I'm just going to look for my trophy thumbnail, and you can use whatever you want, but since we're displaying an image on the screen, we need to have some sort of an image. So I just went ahead and downloaded one. I just downloaded a trophy, a key, and a box. So when I pick this item up, I'm telling it that I'm sending this info to the player. So I'm telling it that this item is trophy, it's quantity 1, and I'm giving it the thumbnail. So now I'm going to do the same thing for my box and my key. So I'm just going to copy this, the get player character and that collected item, and I'm going to go into my box, and we're just going to paste that in there. And then I'm going to change that from trophy to cube, and I'm going to look for my box image that I downloaded, and then compile and save that. And I'm going to do the same thing for my key. So I'm going to change the type to key, look for my thumbnail. So now whenever we pick up one of these items, we're going to be sending this information back to the player as to what item we picked up. And we're populating the struct with what we want. So we're telling the item what it is, we're telling the quantity what it is, and what thumbnail it should have. So now if we jump back to our character, the first person character, we need to make sure that our character is implementing this interface, which mine already is. It already has the interact BPI, but if you just set one up, just go to class settings, implemented interfaces, and just add the interface that you made. So what I'm going to do is, here's my collected item here. I'm going to double click that, and that's going to give me the event. So now when I pick up an item, this event is going to fire, and it's going to have the information in the struct that we need here. So now we're going to make a couple functions in here to handle all this. So I'm going to click new function, and I'm going to name this first one check for item. And I'm going to add an input on this, which is, I'm just going to name item, and that's going to be of the type item struct. We're also going to add this structure that we made to the character, and we're going to make it an array, and that's going to be like our little inventory. So I'm going to make a new variable on the player called item, and we'll look for that item struct. And then I'm going to right click on it to turn it into an array. And then I'm going to compile, save, make sure I click on that item. And since I just have 3 items, I'm just going to give this 3 elements. So now under the check for item, what I can do is get that item array we just made, and we're going to do a for each loop on it. And then coming off the array element, I'm going to break it. And I just need the type, so I'm going to hide everything else. I'm going to drag off and do a branch. And then I want to check if anything in our little inventory here, if we already have this item. So I'm going to drag off and do equals enum. And then I'm going to get this item. This is the item we're passing in now. So I'm going to get this item, just put a little reroute node, and then drag off and break that. So this is going to be what we have, what we already have in our little inventory. This is going to be what we're picking up, what's coming in. So I want to see if we already have this item. So I'm going to drag the type off. And again, we just need the type exposed here so we can hide all that. So I just want to see if we already have this in our inventory or not, because if we do, then all we're going to be doing is just changing the quantity of it. But if we don't, we're going to have to add it. So if we do have this item in our inventory here, we're going to return out of this function. But I want to add an output on here. I actually want to add 2 outputs. So we're going to make one that's called item. And since we already have an item, we have to name it something different. So I'll call this item out. And that's going to be of the type item structure. And then I'm going to add another one that's a Boolean. And we're just going to call that one has item and make that a Boolean. So if we return out of here, we're going to make sure we check has item here. And then I'm just going to get this item. So anytime you have a function that has an input, I can just drag out, I don't have to drag that all the way across. I can just say get item. And if you scroll all the way down, you'll find it. So this variable here is the same thing as this that we're passing in. I have an item array, but I don't have, this isn't an array. This is a single. So this is actually pulling this right here. So just to make it a little cleaner, I'm just going to come over here and I'm going to break that. And we don't need the index. We might not need it for this example, but I wanted to put it in just to make sure. So I'm going to split this item structure pin on the return. I'm going to pass in the type, the quantity. We're going to go quantity, the thumbnail, and I'm just going to grab the index that we're on here, and we're going to plug that in. So I'm just going to do something like that. And so this is going to do our check for us. And then if we don't find anything, so if we don't already have this item, we're going to return out of this return node with has item being unchecked. So what this is basically doing is just seeing if we already have it in inventory. If we do, we're going to return out here and stop the loop, and it's going to return with has item being checked. If we don't have the item, it's going to return with has item being false. So we're done inside of here. So we can go back, we can grab that function we just made. So check for item, and we can plug that in here now, and then pass our item into it. So now when we pick it up, we're going to run that function check for item. Now we can do a branch coming off here and check, was that has item true or not? So I'm going to just do the false first. So if we don't already have the item, then we're going to want to add the item. So I'm going to make a function in here called add item. And again, we're going to give this an input of our item and give that the type of item struct, because we're going to pass our item into here. And then we're going to grab our item array, do a for each loop on that, plug that in. We're going to break this. And again, the only thing we need here is the type. So I'm just going to hide what I don't need. We're going to drag off and do a branch. And then what I want to check for is to see if this is equal to none. And that's why I put the default of none on there, because our empty spots are going to be set to none. So what I'm doing here is just looking for the first empty spot we can find. So this is kind of set up just like an inventory. So I'm looping through the array and I'm looking for the first empty spot. Now, when I find that spot, I want to set whatever item we have coming in to that spot. So I'm going to grab my item array and I'm just going to drag this over. I'll put a reroute node here, and then I'm just going to do get a reference. And then I want to take this index, whatever index we found, and I'm just going to drag this up here and put it in. So we're going to get this index from this array and set the members in there. So we're going to set members, plug that into true, and then we're going to just show all these pins here. So I'm going to plug in the index that we have here. Again, I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to get this item. So all I have to do is just type in get item, just so we're not dragging that across everything. And then I'm going to break that. So whatever the item is that we're passing in, we want to set that type. We want to set our quantity and set our thumbnail. And then I can hide unconnected to get rid of that index in there. So again, this is just adding the item if we don't have it. So we're looping through, checking for an empty spot. When we find one, we're getting that index number of the empty spot. And we're going to set the items in our struct. We're going to set the type, the quantity, and the thumbnail in that index item. And then we're just going to return. So as soon as we find an empty spot, we're going to return, which is going to take us out of the loop. If for whatever reason we don't find an empty spot, if our spots are all full, then we can just return out here. But I have 3 items I can pick up, and we have 3 items in this array. So it's always going to find an empty spot here. So we should be done adding here. So now we can come out back to the actor, get our add item, and we're going to put that to false. And we can use the return from our check for item and bring that over and run that into here. So now if we already have the item, we're just going to be changing the quantity here. So I'm going to make another function just called add quantity. And again, we're going to give this an input. We'll call it item and make sure it's of the type item struct. So we're going to grab our item array and we're going to drag off and do a get. I'm going to get a reference. So now it's asking us what index do we want to get. So we can either split this item or break it. I think I'm just going to break it. So we're going to get this index. That's what we want to get there. And we only need our quantity here, so we can hide the type and the thumbnail. So we're going to get this index and we're going to set members. So I'm going to plug that in there. And I'm going to set the quantity and the index on that. And then I'm going to drag off the get here and we're going to break that. And now we only need the quantity on here. So I'm going to hide everything else. So now we have our quantity there. What we're going to have to do is take whatever quantity we have already and just add it to what we have coming in. So I'm going to do add, and then I'm going to grab this quantity and just add it to there. And then that's going to be the new quantity that we're setting. And I'm going to just pass the index through to it. And then we're just going to return out. So we're getting whatever item we're passing in. We're getting that index. We're taking whatever is currently in that index slot and adding it to the quantity that we have coming in. And then we're setting that to be our new quantity for that index location and then returning out there. So now we can grab that add quantity function and just plug that into our true. So if we do already have it when we check, then has item will be true, and then we're just setting a new quantity. So we just have to feed in our item, which we can just do from right here. And then all we have to do now is the widget. So this should all be working. Our array and our struct should all be populating. So we're going to make one last function, which is just updating our widget. So I'm going to make that function and just call it update. So this is going to be where we're creating our widget from. So I have a reference to the main HUD, which we did in a previous video, because I am creating the main HUD in this character blueprint. So I'm going to get that main HUD reference. And then if we made the wrapbox variable, we should be able to drag off and get wrapbox. So now first thing we want to do when we update is clear children. So we can remove anything that's in there. And then I'm going to get my item array and we're going to loop through. And we're going to be creating a widget. but I only want to create the widget for the spots we have. So what I'm going to do is drag off the array element, and we're going to break that. And then the only thing I want here is the type. So I'm going to just hide that, and we're going to just check, is that type, I want to do a not equal to enum. Is the type not equal to none? So none is our empty spot. So if it's not equal to none, that means that the spot is filled. So that's all I'm going to do, is just a check to see if we're not equal to none, which means it's anything else other than none. So if that's true, we're going to create widget. And the widget we're going to create is that item widget we made. So mine was called WBP item. So that's what I'm going to look for. And then you can see, because we exposed that variable on it, we now have access to feed in the item that we want that widget to display. So I'm going to grab the array element here. So whatever is in this array element, we're going to tell the widget to display that. And then I'm going to drag off this wrap box here, and we're going to drag this out here, put a reroute node, and then I'm going to do add to child to wrap box. We're going to connect that, make sure the return value of the widget goes into the content here. And then coming off the completed pin, I'm just going to return out. So it's going to create this widget for us inside of our wrap box for however many slots we have. So if we only have one item, it's going to create one widget. If we have all 3 items, it's going to create 3 widgets. So this is going to be the update. So it's going to create that widget and feed in the information that we have in our struct to that widget when we update. So we should be all done. Let's compile, save it. Let's go back to our graph. Regardless of if we pick up or we add item, we want to call this update. So I'm going to connect this update to both of these, and we should be all set now. So one thing I forgot to do here is, in this check item, what we want to do is make sure that we connect this incoming item to our return node here too. So if we don't already have this item, we're going to pass that item out of the return. Otherwise, we're not going to have an item to return out of here to add. Let's see what we got here. So now I can grab the box, and you can see the box numbers are going up. We can grab our trophies, and we can grab our key. So it is adding to the existing items we have. It's creating a new widget for whatever item we're picking up. So I have 6 trophies, 6 boxes, and 3 keys in here. So that's everything that we have to pick up there. This was just a little example, but it's more of a practical example because I think a lot of people might want to display items on the screen that the character can pick up. But I think that's going to be it for now. So thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.